Welcome to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
Recently, we celebrated the third annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Activities and Day on our campus, and during that celebration, we had invited from Boise, Idaho, Dr. Mamie Oates Oliver to address our audience, and she was very great to come on this program to also answer our questions while she was visiting in Coeur d'Alene. I'm so happy to welcome Dr. Oliver to our program. She holds a BA, MS, and PhD degrees. She has been involved since receiving those degrees in human services work. In fact, she's worked in that field for 27 years. Dr. Oliver is a graduate of Los Angeles State College and Fresno State University in California and Washington State University. She has conducted many workshops and seminars on human issues and concerns. She is an outstanding speaker, as she demonstrated to our community while here. She is interested in social issues that affect children, families, women, ethnically diverse persons, and the aged. She has been recognized for all her work in many ways, and I don't have time to list all of those, but she certainly has received many such awards. She received the Distinguished Citizen Award from the Idaho Statesman. She also was honored by the Boise March of Dimes as one of the 10 outstanding women in the state of Idaho. Former Governor John Evans, when he was governor, appointed Dr. Oliver to chair of the Idaho's Special Task Force Committee in honoring the first national holiday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. She teaches as associate professor in the Department of Social Work at Boise State University. And she certainly is one of our friends, and we're so delighted to have her on the program. Dr. Oliver, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm very happy to welcome back someone who's been with us many times, and particularly when we deal with human rights. He has been a regular member of the panel for those issues. Father Bill Wasmuth of St. Pius X Catholic Church. He is also president of the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations, and I will ask Father Bill to commence the questioning.
First of all, welcome, Mamie.
Thank you.
Welcome you to Northern Idaho, and to, in the name of the task force, welcome you. Glad to have you here. Look forward to sharing some of your wisdom with the people that will be watching this program. We did invite you up to be a keynote speaker at Martin Luther King's celebration that day. Would you like to share with us just for a bit, what does Martin Luther King and his vision and his dream have to do with us way here in Idaho? I mean, he was in the South, and he was a couple of decades ago. And why now and why here?
Well, I think his eloquence illustrated a lot of things. His humanness was a depiction of a creation of God. But in terms of his social consciousness, he had a sensitivity to people and their experiences. If they'd been oppressed, he had a sensitivity to that. I think now we value his dream because we're still working and struggling to attain some of the things that he worked to accomplish. He was concerned that there was injustice in the world, that we, for some reason, have all kinds of hang-ups about a person's color or a person's economic status. But color seemed to be a very real issue. I think one of the sad things about American society is that we tend to do a lot of thinking in black and white. And I think he said to us when he walked around on the soils of America that we've got to get beyond that, for we are all creations of God, and justice is something that is a concept that we need to understand, we need to deal with, and we need to work to make sure that it's happening in the lives of people. And so I feel that just because he's not physically with us, we cannot forget what he taught us. And I think it's valuable today, and it's important for us to think personally about, how does freedom feel to me? How does opportunity feel to me? And if I feel pain, that should give me a sensitivity to how other people would experience pain, and then that should help me to avoid giving pain to someone, but also challenge me to be about the business of sensitizing other people.
Good.
Dr. Oliver, we heard so much in the public media and from organizations and groups throughout the 1960s of the issue of civil rights. Then came the 70s and the 80s, and there was such a, I guess, movement away from a discussion of civil rights and dealing with other issues. So now as we look back here in 1988 at that movement and the legislation and the programs that went into place, what is the status of civil rights today? I know I've talked with you about this earlier. Have we made progress, yes or no?
Yes and no. I think certainly there are people who have recognized change. Dr. King, initially living in the South, naturally felt the responsibility to deal with some of the specifics of the black and white issue in the South, because there was the thought of, on the part of many, that black people should not have opportunity to move into, do not have the right to certain things, whether it be education or work or just any place to sit on the bus for that matter. So I think that we have moved away from some of that, but I think now we've gotten involved in subtle ways of being oppressive. It was very clear in the 60s that you couldn't go a certain place, you couldn't go and eat lunch a certain place, you couldn't ride on the bus, or you couldn't stay in a certain motel. We have made some legal moves, but you don't legislate people's hearts. I think a part of the problem is that we've passed some laws that have challenged people to not blatantly oppress people. But at the same time, it's harder sometimes to deal with the subtle attitudes, because one can assume, for example, I can go into a restaurant, I can go into any restaurant now, but I'm also still aware of the fact that I might go in that restaurant and I may be seated in certain places in that restaurant, you know, back by the cook, back by where they wash dishes. Or I can go into a restaurant and sit for a long time and wonder why I'm not served. And nobody's going to say anything to me. They can't tell me I can't come in there. So I think we've come a long way. But we've got a long way to go, because there are people who still have deep-seated beliefs that there's some people that are superior and other folks who are inferior, and that those kinds of things interfere with human rights being attained to.
I would like to pursue what Reverend Lowry has been emphasizing of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference during this particular year of honoring Dr. King. He said many of the things that you're saying concerning that voting rights have been guaranteed, the ability to use facilities in this country. But he's really emphasizing what Dr. King was emphasizing so much at the end of his life, the economic troubles that many, many Americans face. Would you address that concern that Reverend Lowry has, and what might happen in that area?
Well, I think a part of it, and I think I said it in the speech earlier today, excuse me, the dollar doesn't have the same value in America. And that's one problem. If you didn't have but a nickel in the beginning, you now have 50 cents, you now have a dollar, but if the value of it has changed, you're still at a disadvantage. So I think many people are economically trying to catch up. And then you can't catch up if you do not have opportunity in the workplace. Then you sometimes have to have skill developed, which means you have to have some education. And you know, we know how new it is that certain persons in the society have even had access, the opportunity to go into certain higher ed institutions. Whether we talk of black people or white people or poor people, we talk of all kinds of folk. People have different disadvantages, and then the complexity of American society influences what happens to people economically. So if you've been living on a farm, and farming has been the way of life for your family, and then none of your family can survive because small farms are literally going out, then what do? You have to learn a new skill and a new way to survive. So I think that's a lot of what creates the problem. And until we can deal with some base issues that are causes, you know, we're going to have what Dr. Lowry and many others talk about.
Father Bill.
You mentioned the conversion of heart, or the changing of hearts, and you can't legislate that. You know, I deal with that a little bit as a preacher and as a pastor, and you're married to a pastor, and from talking with you, I think you share a lot of that work with him. But apart from the religious conversion kind of thing, the change of heart that's necessary. In our own area, I think we have confronted the radical racism, and we've, through law enforcement and some other means, we've controlled that in our area. But I agree with you, as you mentioned, that the laws of the 50s and 60s changed the structure, but the conversion of heart didn't happen. I think the same thing could very possibly be true in our area. The Aryan threat was there. We've managed to control that, and we've managed to put limits to that. But I'm not sure that the change of heart is happening there, and I hope that we don't lose the energy until that change of heart is accomplished more fully in our area. Any suggestions about how do we do the change of heart? How do we go about that? How does that happen?
Okay. I think it's most important that we understand why the change of heart doesn't occur. I think for some people, they have basic beliefs that some folk do not even deserve to have opportunity and access. But I think another much more important concept has to do with, I think, a world issue that's been true for a long time. It's the issue of survival and power. For some people, you know, if I don't like you, then I don't like you. But if I don't like you because you hold a place that I need to have, or I'm in a place, if you get there, I don't have a place, it's a survival issue, so a power struggle comes into play. So I think we need to recognize, why do people oppress? Why do people do what they do? Is it a belief that someone is subordinate to me, or some kind of ethnocentric attitude that somebody else is superior? So I think how you deal with that is first to realize what motivates people. If a person is motivated by the fear that they won't have a job or they won't have a way to support their family, then the issues we need to deal with are things like, what kind of employment is available within a community, and what do we have available for different people, and try to make sure that we have resources to meet the needs of a variety of people. Because if it's only a matter of fear that I won't survive if I don't have an income, that's not the same as my feeling that I'm better than you, or vice versa. So I think we have to first get that clarified. Once we get that clarified, then we need to be addressing the issue of employment, of human rights for all folks. And I think we need to talk about that. I think one of the problems we've had in our society for so long, we tend to alienate people because somebody is mad. When people get mad at each other, they don't talk. We have to find a way to continue the dialogue, to continue the interaction, and it has to be meaningful interaction that's goal-oriented. And I think what has happened is that we tend to get people coming together who always agree. When people come together that agree, I'm not sure that they just get their energies revitalized to go about the action of change. But we need to spend some time having dialogue with people who don't agree with us, so we can try to figure out what's the reason for disagreement. Because we may be able to get some people to reason. I mentioned in the speech earlier, let us reason together. As we can reason, we get some understanding of the motivation and the reasons for people's attitudes. Then I think we can at least start to gain some sources that way. And I think we really don't do enough. We don't do enough of that. We tend to, in our celebrations, get with folks that we like and they like us, and I mean, we have a great time. It's like I said earlier, it's like a family reunion. It takes a certain amount of energy to talk to somebody that really seems to be out to lunch to us. Can we talk to them about their motivations? And I really believe that we have a lot of communication, a lot of interaction going on now, but not much communication. You know, people talk, but what are they talking about? And I don't think that we can really just, you know, fight people and criticize. We have to reason together. And we don't do that at a national level or international level. We're in power struggles all the time. Now, I don't know if that's philosophically way out, but I just somehow feel that people don't want to sit down and take time to hear each other. I don't see enough of that.
So dealing with the whole issue of racism and prejudice, we can never isolate that issue. We got to incorporate that into the economic issue. We have to incorporate that and see it as a part of the power struggle issue.
I believe
between people, to see the threat that comes, and we perceive things as threats that aren't really threats. It's a whole picture there. I
really believe that that's true. My staying in Idaho, for example, I've been in Idaho 15 years, and I've been in the Northwest since 1968. I was in Spokane before I was in Boise. But particularly in Idaho, you know, people say, well, gee, how do you stay there? You're culturally different, you're ethnically different. And I say, well, the challenge has been too great to leave.
There you go.
You know, by staying, people are going to ask me questions, and I feel some responsibility to respond. I could just say, why do you want to ask me that? I use it as a way to open up communication. And I don't say, why do you ask me that? I actually give them my feedback. I tell them how I really feel. I don't need a particular kind of community to survive. I said, I'm a person. You know, I eat, I sleep, I do all the things you do. Now let's talk about that. And it helps people to recognize my humanness. So I exist as a human being. As I said earlier, you know, my blackness is something I had nothing to do with. But I can use it as, you know, to help other people better understand me culturally or ethnically. And I also say to them, when you hear me, you only hear me. I don't speak for a race. I don't speak for a group of persons. I speak for myself. But if you're willing to talk to me, maybe we can have the kind of dialogue and the kind of meaningful exchange that you won't be afraid to talk to somebody else who might look like me. So I see that as a challenge in my life.
Dr. Oliver, we who are activists in the field of human rights, we often get, particularly after certain things are in place, such as the national legislation. Now we experienced that some in Idaho with the Idaho legislation last year, or with other things that happen that are on the very positive side. There are people, I'm sure they're well-meaning, but they make comments like, the basic struggle is over, and you know we have to. You do, I know, all the time. You have to deal with this all the time. This, how would you address those persons who say, well, there's not a lot to be done, it's already been done, or just let it stay in place? You've lost your mic too, it's fallen down there. But how would you respond to people who say, there's not things to be done today?
Well, you know, one of the first things I would ask them, give me some examples of what's been done. I want to see what they really know. See, sometimes people say that because they don't want to do anything and they're not too excited about what's happening or what has been done. So I try and give them some responsibility, and that also starts us talking again. And I find that when I can get into that kind of exchange, and they might use an example of one person who has succeeded. I mean, people are very quick to, particularly if you talk about blacks, people are very quick to tell you, do you know the one, you know, and they'll pick a personality and say, well, he's making $1 million. I mean, I had that personally happen to me in my department some years ago when I was confronting some issues within the department that I felt were just, you know, higher ed issues. And I was called into the office, and the door was closed, and the comment was made to me, why are you feeling the need to bug folks? You've made it. And I say, what does that have to do with the people that I'm concerned about? We're concerned about students. And I happen to be involved in a higher ed institution where I'm concerned about students. So what I say to people, I first ask them to tell me what examples can they give me of what has occurred. And then I can also give them examples of things that have not occurred and why the struggle needs to continue, and also try to help them understand that what they see as success is very little success when you compare that to what's happening to the masses. So you provide information to people. You encourage people to read. You encourage people to discuss. You encourage people to experience. I think people need to get out of their own communities, and even if they live in a community, they need to move from different sections of the community. If you go to a private school, then you need to see what the public sector is doing. If you have rich friends, then you need to have some poor friends. So I think it's a matter of challenging people to engage themselves in practical, applied experience to see if what they think is true.
Thank you. Father Bill?
If you could tell the governor of Idaho or the governors of the 5 states of the Northwest, this particular area, what would be your primary agenda item for them? And if you say, this is what we most need to work on right now, what would you tell them? What's the priority of agenda that level of government should be pursuing?
Well, I really have a real concern about what I call institutional change. I really believe that we need to take some time and take inventory of our educational system. You know, what are we teaching children about human relations and human rights and race, and, you know, what kind of information are we providing? And I would like to say to governors that we need to hear from all of the public about these issues. Because I find that in this part of the country, since you have not a lot of numbers of persons of ethnic diversity, and some women making issues and older people making issues, that people do not think that the problem is very serious. But I do have a real strong feeling about institutionalizing philosophical statements and curriculum material that talks about oppression, talks about racism, explains that with real teaching units. And what I'm talking about with younger children. I would also like to say to governors and to state boards of education that we need to look at what we require in our schools. You know, you can literally go through any higher ed institution in the state of Idaho. I'm not sure about some of the other states in the Northwest, but you're not required. You take things like sociology, but we do not have a kind of mandate that requires that we truly look at multi-ethnicity, that we truly look at issues that need to be addressed. And I'd like to see committees be appointed to wade through and truly review our curriculum, you know, at every level. K to 12, what do we require students in college to take? In social work programs, the Council on Social Work Education requires that all students take some kind of course that they learn something about gender issues, racist issues, you know, so the issues of age, poverty and that kind of thing. But I would like to say to governors, are you willing to appoint people to really seriously look at what do people have to learn about people who are different?
I'd certainly agree with you. I think in terms of education, we often forget that that the younger people that are coming up through the school systems, et cetera, don't know anything about the civil rights movement because they were too young. It's not their fault. They don't know about it.
Right.
They need to be educated in it. We have to constantly remind adults and make adults aware and renew that within ourselves. Well, we certainly have to hand that on to young people if we expect it to get better, if we expect it to improve.
The other thing I'm concerned about, that so often when you say to political people who are in power, we need to look at these issues, people start talking in terms of the dollar again. And I really feel there has to be a way that we sit down and figure out, how do we really use the dollar? We spend it, for sure. But I'm concerned that the issues that have to do with oppression and opportunity and racism and all that, I'm not sure that we really concentrate. I think to some people, it doesn't even exist.
Something else that I would like to pursue, and I guess I'm influenced by the fact that we have this new organization called the Northwest Coalition Against Malicious Harassment. And one thing that's been so promising with this new organization is that I sense from talking to others that there's been such a lack in this country of various groups coming together that have very common goals and show lots of courage. We've had many ethnic groups, we've had many groups that are in low income, so forth, having great needs, but never having a coalition, never coming together. And one of the reasons many people feel that we have not had more progress is because various groups have been isolated rather than there is power in numbers and in unity. How would you react to that across the United States? Has that been a problem, and do you see this encouraging as an encouraging sign to maybe bring people together to work for a change?
Well, let me start by saying this. I think one of the problems of us as humans is that we tend to be pretty selfish. I mean, we start with number one. And when people feel in their own little niche as an individual that their struggles and their stresses are so heavy, they can't get to the point of uniting and connecting with someone else. When I look at what's happening to young people in the inner city, when I look at what's happening in the drug culture and the family stresses that we see going on, alcoholism, all kinds of issues that I see going on, the various diseases, social diseases that we're having to deal with, and a lot of this comes out of stresses. I think that coalitions serve a very definite purpose, and I certainly am supportive of coalitions, but I think we've got to spend some time recognizing that we've got a lot of hurting individuals, and our collectives will not occur until we can get people more comfortable with being, feeling solid as a human being. Why do people need to drink themselves to death? The whole thing of being just so sick and so diseased with alcoholism, or feeling that you don't want to face a real day. It's much easier to do it on a high. I'm concerned about that level of pain, because I think that until we can deal with that, what you're attempting to do and what I see happening here, we're not going to get as many of those, because people will have coalitions that do not represent the same goals. And I don't want to avoid your question, but I feel the need to say that I am concerned about why individuals experience so much stress. That tells me something is going on in the larger society around us.
Thank you. Father Bill.
Asked you about the agenda you'd give the governor. There are a number of different task forces and such kind of groups around the state. I chair one currently. Tony chairs the Northwest Coalition. Grassroots kinds of things, ordinary citizens who are concerned about human rights and who are doing what they can to pursue that. What would you tell us? What kind of an agenda would you give us? What kind of prioritizing would you give us? What do we need to pursue? Education, certainly, I would think that that's local community level as well. More than that?
Okay, I think we need to also touch the systems and the organizations that influence the lives of people. And the school only happens to be one. Churches do it. Civic groups do it. Social clubs do it. We need to find the groups that influence people. Because if you have a meeting and you have a certain number of persons that come to your meetings, and a task force will meet and you've got a certain number of people there, I think it's important that people be delegated out to influence other systems that influence people on an active basis, monthly, weekly, have people, because many people who sit on task force groups also have a membership in a club or a civic organization. They're already interested in it, they're already connected with it. What can we give them to do? What kind of things can we delegate out to them that they can then bring feedback to the task force, which gives us a feel of what's happening in those places that influence so many people. You have some religious groups that have a greater grasp on family than do others. And so I think we need to have an influence on the systems and the institutions and the groups and the organizations that influence the larger society. Mm-hmm. And then that feedback needs to be flowing continually to the task force so that you have a sense of what's going on out there.
So that the task force, if it's really to do what it's supposed to do, needs to remain very much a part of community and very much in touch with community, yes, rather than somehow pull itself away. Yes. I very much agree with that. I think the time of kind of super removed from real life groups is past. That's what could change the structures and change the laws in a way. But if we're going to get back to the change of heart that's necessary, then we're dealing with one-on-ones and with families and with smaller organizations and where people really live.
Yeah. See, the danger of setting yourself apart as a task force group is that people can say it's a special interest group. Mm. And they can sort of see you over there doing your thing apart from them, and they don't feel any responsibility to be involved. Right. But if you make sure that there's that involvement at many different levels, hopefully that will not happen.
Right, right.
Many people are saying that there's been a lack of moral leadership in this country dealing with this issue in recent years. How would you respond to that?
Well, I think it's tied to the other issue, and that is that some people deny that it's a problem. And I think people have observed what has happened to folk who stick their neck out. And I think we're basically creatures of comfort. And it takes a lot of courage to put your life on the line. And I think the absence of moral leadership doesn't mean that we have no persons really interested and committed. It's frightening. And you have to really be committed on a day-to-day basis and know that it's going to cost you something.
With that, I'm so sorry to bring the program to conclusion. We're out of time. Dr. Oliver, I know I am joined by Father Bill and our staff for thanking you for this excellent interview and also the time you spent in our community. It's been most inspirational, and I know we're a better community because you've been here.
Thank you for having me.
Most definitely.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest has been Dr. Mamie Oliver, discussing a very, very important part of our life, human rights, and we hope you've enjoyed our program, and I want to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.